So we are recording. We got Robert now. So the three that we know should be showing up, and then Sammy hopefully can come a little later, like you said.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Well, shall I open the doors? Let's do this.
Sure, Jillian.
I'm just going to wait a second while everybody joins in. Do some filler babble while your computers connect to audio and video. My name is Jillian, and I'm the one who's babbling right now, and Angie's the one who's going to be teaching, so don't worry. I'm welcoming all of you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight at Intro to Photography with Angie Patterson. I am not Angie Patterson, as I just said. I just want to make sure everybody can actually hear me. You don't necessarily have to turn your camera or mic on, but if someone can throw in the chat that they can or cannot hear me so that I'm not just speaking into the ethos. I hear you. Thank you so much. MJ said that in the chat. Perfect. So, like I said, you don't have to turn on your camera or your mics. It may make, like, the option to do that may make some troubleshooting easier, but we'll kind of cross those bridges when we get there. But for now, y'all can stay anonymous without your cameras turned on. So, like, as I said, my name's Jillian. I'm here on behalf of McBain Camera. Thank you so much for coming tonight and joining us. I think we will be joined later by one of our other attendees. They're just running late. So on that vein, I want to mention I will be recording tonight's session. I will record all of the sessions. They will not be posted anywhere. They are explicitly for your review purposes, the review purposes of the people attending tonight's class. So don't worry, we're not going to put it anywhere. Just recording it so that when people are late or can't show up to a class, they can still get all of the content. So I'm going to be monitoring tonight's chat. Just going to do a little bit of housekeeping before I hand things over to Angie. I'm going to monitor the chat, but please feel free. The entire purpose of tonight is to educate it, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have as we go along, either in the chat or out loud with your mic. It's a small group tonight, so it's not like we're going to be shouting all over 20,000 people. So feel free to ask any questions that come to mind. And I often throw this in there just as an option. I will throw, you should have an email address that you can get in contact with either myself or Angie by now. But just in case you don't, I'll throw in the workshop at McBainCamera.com email address in the chat, just so you can have that. Because I always like to throw this in there. I suffer from what I call staircase wit. I only think of something to ask or say after it's far too late to do that. So if you think of something that's pertinent to tonight's class, or you want to get answered before next class, then please email me or email Angie. We want to teach. We don't want to, force you to come out to the class just to get a question answered. So please, by all means, do that. And I think I am done chit-chatting for now. I'm going to hand things off to Angie. I will mention that you can control how things are viewed. So if you want to make Angie's screen take up the bulk of your screen, there is a little view icon in the top right corner, I believe, should be anyway, where you can sort of select how it's presented on your screen. So if you make Angie your host by right-clicking on her, you should be able to make her your host. Oh, maybe not. Oh, yeah. So if you make Angie the host on your Zoom meeting with the little little ellipses to the right of her name, then you can make it so that it follows Angie as the main speaker, because I'm not going to be here for most of it. So anyway, that is all. Any questions or concerns, go ahead and ask. If not, I'm going to hand things off to Angie.
Thank you for that, Jillian. You welcome everyone. I see Robert. Hey, Robert, welcome. And MJ and Whitney. So one thing, as Jolene mentioned, it is up to you if you are not going to make you have your cameras on. From a teaching perspective, it can be easier sometimes with your cameras on, just with the interaction kind of back and forth, but it's not mandatory. So welcome to the 4 weeks, and our goal is that you'll have lots of opportunities for questions, hands-on exercises as we go through these 4 weeks. We'll begin with just so I'll just kind of give you a heads up on kind of how it works. I'll begin with just a kind of a round table where everyone will get to just a short sentence or 2 or 3 or whatever you would like to share as to what it is that you would like to get out of the 4 weeks together. If you have something specific that you want to learn about your camera or photography or a field of photography that you like, there are no wrong answers to anything. So just whatever it is, the kind of the reason why you signed up. And so actually, let's do that first, and then I will go on and just kind of give you an overview on how the evenings will run, the 4 evenings. All right, so does anyone like to just throw this out there and begin? I'm open to whoever would like to go first. Oh, MJ says, all right, learn how to use my camera, haha. All right, MJ, sounds good. And MJ, do you have favorite, I guess, topics or topics, but favorite subjects that you like to photo, or specific situations where you're thinking beyond just learning how to use your camera? It's like, I would really like to know how to do this or photograph that. Anything to add?
Mostly my 2 children and my 5 pets, and I really like scenic pictures or whatever. So, but mostly my kids and pets.
Okay, and how old are your kids?
10 and 8.
Okay, awesome. And what kind of camera do you have, MJ?
I have a Canon Rebel.
Okay. All right. Okay, sounds great, MJ. Anything else you'd like to add, or you're fine with that to begin with?
I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks, MJ. Nice to have you in the class. All right. Whitney, would you like to go next?
Sure. Same thing as MJ. I just want to get comfortable with my camera. It's the first time I've had an actual camera that's not a cell phone, so I really want to take advantage of it. I just don't know where to start.
Good for you. That's exciting. And what kind of camera do you have?
Rebel T7.
Okay. And do you have particular subjects or ideas in mind, or types of photos or situations that appeal to you, even if you were taking photos with your phone, what you like to take photos of?
I like to do like wildlife and scenery, outdoors, travel. We do a lot of trips, so that's when I really put it to use.
Oh, nice. Okay, and what kind of lenses do you have? So I meant to ask you that too, MJ, but when you mentioned travel and wildlife,
Um,
do you have like some zoom lenses? Kind of can
I
get you
do
close
have
to...
one. I'm not sure how to, I'm
And
not
you
sure
know
what
what?
differentiates it.
If not, that is no problem, because you will find out as we go here.
Okay,
That will be
perfect.
something that you'll get to investigate. Okay, MJ, thanks, MJ. MJ says, I have some, but no idea how to tell what they are or how to use them. Great. Well, and I guess that's why you're here, right? Is we're going to have fun figuring that out. I'm looking forward to Jolene and I discovering what you have for lenses. All right, thanks. Whitney, is there anything else you'd like to add, or that's it?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, awesome. And great to have you here. Welcome to the class too. You're welcome. All right, Robert. And how about you, Robert?
This is actually quite embarrassing.
It's okay. I've been there. Whatever you're going to say, I might have been there.
Back in the late 70s, I was in high school and I was part of the yearbook, and I developed black and white photography, and I had a minimalistic 35 millimeter camera, and I loved playing with it. When I first got my real decent job, I ended up upgrading to a really nice Ricoh 35 millimeter camera, and I got used to using all kinds of lenses and yada, yada, yada. And I thought I was doing pretty good at all of that stuff. Once again, taking in my film to get processed and then picking the odd picture to get blown up or do things with.
Ah,
And then along came this weird digital revolution, and I got
Yeah.
stuck.
okay.
And I didn't know what to do. So back in 2014, I dropped, I don't know, what I thought was serious money at the time, and bought a Nikon D5300.
Okay.
And it's fairly robust. It's very much like my Ricoh of years past. I really like the feel of it. I like the attributes and all that sort of stuff. But I'm stuck on auto mode.
Okay.
I don't want to get off of auto mode because I don't know what I'm doing. And the really scary part for me is understanding all of these file formats and sizes and the terminology that goes with that. And then even after I get through all of that, I would have trouble trying to figure out, well, how do I get them off my camera onto a computer?
Okay. Great points
Um,
here, Robert.
I have one lens, which is a 18 to 140 millimeter, which is a sort of do-it-all sort of thing.
Okay.
My interest would be taking pictures of the night sky. And I'm under the impression that there's such a good resolution with these electronic cameras that I shouldn't have to even put the thing on a stand. I should be able to just take a picture, and the ISO should be able to actually capture some of these stars. And I think in the latter part of, class 3 or class 4, I like to be introduced to some sort of a decent software package that would help me play with the images on my computer.
Okay. All right. So
So
great
I know
points
nothing
from
about digital
everyone.
photography.
Okay. All right. Thanks for all of that, Robert. And yeah, Jolene and I did talk about probably in lesson 4 that I will go through an introduction for you. We'll kind of have I'll have some lead up questions for you, Whitney and MJ. Thanks to Robert for bringing this topic up and getting the photos from the camera to the computer. And I use Lightroom. So I will give you, we'll do a screen share, probably class 4, and I will give you a brief overview of kind of my workflow. You may discover a different workflow. I'll give you some suggestions for workflows from friends and other photographers that I'm aware of, and just so to help you decide, well, maybe I don't want to organize my photos this way because, or, well, hey, that sounds like a good idea, and I think maybe I'd like to do some of that way. And we'll reiterate kind of on what Robert has said is that for this first class, it's not always the most exciting, but I will delve into some of the intricacies of your camera, some of the settings, a couple of the file formats and size formats so that you have some familiarity with that. And I'll talk to you about just why it's beneficial to know what's going on back there for file size so that you can decide how you want to set your cameras up and why, the pros and cons. And the hands-on exercise for tonight, because I'd like to have you be able to do some hands-on exercises, will be to discover what your camera is actually doing for you when it's in the automatic shooting mode. And so the goal of the 4 weeks is that I will guide you through understanding what the camera is doing in the automatic mode so that you can then graduate to 2 of the semi-automatic settings, which would be an aperture priority mode. And we'll talk about what that is and what it can do for you and how to use it. And then the shutter speed priority mode, and same thing, what that is, how to use it. And that will lead you then into the 4th component, which would be shooting in the full manual mode, which is where you're making all of the camera setting choices yourself, so that you can have an overview going right from the auto setting all the way through the manual and experience how that works, what the camera's doing for you. I'll help you troubleshoot, so when photos don't turn out perhaps as you anticipated, what you can do to brainstorm, and we'll brainstorm together and get you to the point where you'll have that introduction to shooting in manual. And I will send Jolene at the end of each class, I will send Jolene an overview of what we've discussed in each class, just kind of for some notes for you. And then I'll also add at the bottom of the email she'll send is what I call a fun photo project, which hopefully will be fun for you. And it will be based on what we will have discussed in the class. So for tonight, for example, the project will probably lean towards just having you go and take a few photos in the camera's automatic mode in different lighting situations, which I will have you do this evening as well. And then you'll have the opportunity to, through the lessons, to submit 1 or 2 of your photos to me prior to the class. Like, I prefer them the day before, so I have time to just get them organized prior to the class. And it could be a combination of something that you've learned and taken a photo of. It could be a photo that you're really proud of that you would like to share with the class and talk about with us. And it could be one that has just caused you some problems and it didn't turn out how you were hoping. And we can discuss kind of the backstory to your photo and kind of why it didn't turn out. We could discuss some things, kind of do some problem solving. Okay, so the idea is for lots of hands-on. You'll also probably find, because it seems to be really consistent whenever I have a group class, is, and I do encourage this at any time. So a couple of things. One is, as Jolene said, if you have any questions at any time as I'm going along, just please interrupt me or throw something in the chat. Jolene will see your message there. We want to make sure that we leave no one behind. Okay, and there is no question that is considered a silly question. They're all fair game. I've been there, done that, as far as, you know, just remembering what it's like to be in when I was in my beginner shoes. So every question is fair game. And you'll also find too that what can happen is one of you will ask a question, and, you know, as a participant, you are welcome to jump in and offer your 2 cents worth. You know, you may have a similar feature on your camera that you have discovered how it works. And so, you know, you're more than welcome to jump into the conversation, add your comments, and just, you know, everyone can be involved and inclusive. And as I say, I think the most important thing I'd like to emphasize is whenever you have a question or I've said something in a way that doesn't make sense to you, then just let us know and we'll just approach it from a different angle, okay, and offer some other suggestions, so that the goal is that you don't leave confused about anything or feel like you've missed something or you're left behind. Okay, so for this evening, as I say, some of it may not be quite as exciting as hands-on, let's get using the camera, but it's kind of like a housekeeping almost, with some things that I like to make sure that you know about your camera, just some basic features and where to find things. And then also at the towards the end of each class, probably towards the end, sometimes Jolene and I mix it up a little bit, but I will have photo examples where I'll do a screen share and show you examples of whatever it is we might be talking about for the lesson. And also I will include composition and different lighting or exposures, right? So if something is too bright, if it's too dark, or why I had a photo that did not turn out, because I think sometimes we can learn as much from that as what does turn out. And so you will see some of my bloopers. And then also photos where I point out, here are some images, and this is why I feel that they work. You may have a difference of opinion, but I will point those out as well. All right, so okay, so we'll get started with just some of sorry, I'm just checking my notes here for you. Okay, so just start with some of the camera basics. And one of the things that I like to start with is dealing with your memory card. And if you can tell me if all of you have, and you can just put up your hand or shout your answer out or put it into chat, whatever you prefer. Do you have photos on the memory card that's in your camera? Just kind of a yes or no.
Yeah,
Yes, you do, Whitney.
5 years ago.
You do,
I
Robert.
think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
from about 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. All right. And MJ, do you as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this first step that I'm going to show you, then you will not go through the whole process unless you do not want those photos anymore, because I will talk to you about formatting your memory card. And before I get into that, is there anyone that has formatted a card? Are you familiar with that? Or this is something that is just completely new for you?
New for me.
New for you? Okay, Whitney, thanks.
Well, if I have photographs on my card, does that mean that it's already been pre-formatted already?
It would, unless you, and I think I heard you say, Robert, that you have photos on there from several years. Am I right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So if you still have photos on your card and the card you did not format the card in your camera right back in the beginning when it was new, then I would say that no, you have not formatted your card.
Okay,
You may have deleted photos,
they
right,
have
but
been
not
downloaded
wiped
already
everything
onto my
off.
computer. Sorry, they have been downloaded already onto my computer. So if we wanted to get rid of it, I'm happy with that too.
Okay. All right. And yeah, that is the key point. If you know, you can go through with this formatting process that I'm going to walk you through if you have them backed up somewhere and you're really comfortable and confident that it's okay for them to be gone. If you're not, then at a certain point in this, you will stop and you will not press the OK button. Okay. All right. And how about you, MJ? Do you know if you have formatted your card, or is that something that you're just not familiar with?
I definitely have not.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so the reason I like to talk about formatting your memory card is it's kind of twofold. One is I look at it as kind of a way to keep your card healthy, if you will. So that's one purpose. Um, it helps kind of the length of the card, the use of your card for a longer period of time. It helps reduce any incidences of some strange corrupt thing going on that's going to have you not able to access your photos, like I currently have on one of my cards, actually, and some kind of strange things happening. But also, if all of you were to go out and say buy a new memory card tomorrow, and before now you've obviously proven to yourselves that yes, it still works. You can put it in your camera, you have photos on the card, so it works. But if you were to go out and buy a new card tomorrow, and the first thing you did was put it in your camera, and then you go to your menu, we'll help you walk through this to do this, and you format your card, then one thing that does is it helps prepare the card for use in your camera. Okay, so it's kind of like just having the camera and the card kind of connect and be able to communicate with each other. Now, as you've proven, it still works if you haven't, but it is just kind of a good habit to get into, is to fairly regularly format your card. So what do I mean by that? Well, depending on how many photo shoots I might be out on or how many photos I have on a memory card. And the key is, if right now I'm playing a little bit of catch up with backing up some photos, but once I'm comfortable with that, then I will format my memory card. In a year, then perhaps, my gosh, I don't know, I might format my card, say, a dozen times in a year. might even be more than that. And just so I keep it cleaned off. So I will use the format function rather than delete as well. Because when you format, like when you delete, little bits of picture file residue get left behind on the card, just little minuscule pieces. But over time, they can kind of add up and you may never have an issue. But formatting also helps just kind of clean off some of that residue and just help keep the card healthy. So, Jolene, before we walk them through the format the card, is there anything you'd like to add to that about memory cards?
I think you covered it all. I mean, like formatting is just basically telling your camera how to talk to the card. You do it with USBs or yeah, it's just a nice way to keep them clean and healthy, like you said.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jolene. All right. So depending on your cameras, we'll start off with, now, if you have trouble here, just let us know and Jolene will help you out. Is if you probably start off going to the back of your camera and looking for the little round button that says menu on it. Okay, and then once you have menu, then if you go down and look for the, oh my gosh, I think it's in the shooting menu. Let me just quickly check that for you. No, I think it's not actually. Sorry, one second.
For both.
Setup menu. Sorry, the setup menu.
Yeah, it'll
Right,
be the
little
spanner.
wrench. Yeah, so you're going to look for that little wrench or that little spanner icon. If you have a round toggle switch, okay, I'll hold my camera up here, see if you can see this. Where am I? Right. Okay, right here, I have a round little toggle switch with OK in the middle and 4 little arrows, a down and up and a left and a right arrow.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, setup menu. Once you're in that setup menu, if you then hit your right arrow to get yourself over to the kind of to the page, so to speak, or the screen. And on my particular camera, I see at the very top of that list, format memory card.
Yep.
Okay, so you found yours, Robert. Great. Whitney, have you found yours? Not yet. Okay, how about you, MJ?
No, I haven't.
Okay, did I see you nod your head there, Whitney?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I found it.
Okay. All right, MJ. Okay, so MJ, are you when you look in your setup menu, or have you been able to access your setup menu?
No, I'm not even there yet.
No problem. Okay,
I don't know where it is.
that's okay. Did you find the menu button?
No.
Okay, is there a menu button on the back of your camera?
Oh my gosh, way on the other side. Okay, sorry, I found it.
No problem. That's okay.
Caught
No
up.
worries. No worries at all. Okay, so if you just press that menu button then, MJ.
Yeah.
Okay, and then do you see a bunch of stuff highlighted on the back of your camera, including a little wrench icon?
Yeah, there's 3 little wrenches.
Oh,
That's okay. It'll be on the first wrench.
Yep, I found format card. Got it.
okay. So now if you right arrow, it will bring you up a message like so yours may be slightly different. Like mine brings it up because I have 2 slots in this particular camera. It'll be like, do I want slot 1 or slot 2? If you have 1 slot, then I think it will just bring up format. Now, if you right arrow, then your camera, I would expect, this is where you kind of need to be careful here, that your camera will ask you something about, or say all images on the memory card will be deleted, okay? Do not hit the okay if you are not okay with that, okay? But just know that this is where you would go to format your memory card after you have your photos backed up on your computer or an external hard drive, and you're comfortable that they are secure as they can be somewhere else. So Robert, if you would like to, you know, it's up to you if you want to do that tonight or just double check everything is good. This is where, like on my camera, I need to hit the up arrow to get to the yes. And then I would hit OK. And it's really quick, right? It's not like you're waiting,
I just
you know,
did that.
several minutes.
Yeah, I just did that.
Just did that? Okay.
Just did it. It's done.
Okay, so now then, Robert, you will have if you were to hit, if you have hit, so sorry, you said you hit format, right?
Yeah, and it took like 3 seconds, and I'm gone back to the same menu before. It appears to be done already.
Okay, so if you just tap your shutter button, Robert, just give it a little tap, that'll kind of get you out of the menu.
Yep.
So the little button, right, as if you were going to take a photo, probably right
Yep.
on top of the camera body.
Yep.
And then if you hit your playback arrow as if you wanted to preview a photo, it would say there's no photos to view or something like that, I would expect.
Okay, you're outside my scope. I don't know how do I look at pictures that were there?
Oh, okay. Okay, no problem. That's a good question for everyone. I'll hold my camera up here. I don't know if you can see it. Mine is like a little sideways triangle. It looks like it's like a triangle on its side.
Oh, okay. Contains no images.
Yeah, so there you go. Okay, now if you were even now, Robert, if you just aimed your camera anywhere and took a photo in your house, and then you pressed that again, you would now see an image. Or I would expect that you would. Yes, there you go. Okay. And now if you wanted, you could keep that on there, or we can delete it after, or you can format your card again if you'd like to practice.
Well, what is interesting, sorry to hold up the class here. What's interesting is it shows the date and time, and it's October 1st, 2022.
Oh, that is interesting. Okay, we'll maybe go into another section of your camera. You know, that kind of reminds me, maybe Jolene, you can speak on this. I used to have a Pentax, I think it was a D60 way back when. And I'm attempting to remember that when I took the battery out to charge it and put the battery back in, I had to reset the date. But I could be way off base with that.
Yeah,
Have to, because there is also a secondary battery that runs the internal clock. But so you shouldn't have to, and if you do, that usually means that internal battery is.
Okay, well, we can probably find that at some time here for you too, Robert, and have you see if we can get that updated for you.
that sounds like homework for me.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, so we have our first formatter. Okay, Robert. Whitney, how are things going for you?
It's good. So yeah, I have the format card, and when I select it, it goes to, are you sure all data will be lost? So if I am doing a new memory card, I just go to OK, and that's the whole process?
Yes, and it probably literally take, I don't know, 1 or 2 seconds. It's super quick, almost to the point where one could wonder if anything actually happened.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I got it.
All right, good job. How about you, MJ?
Yeah, everything's good here too. Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome. Okay, way to go.
I have a question.
Right. Sure.
You spoke about how quickly it would take, and I have to assume that it was really, really quick on my end because I probably had like maybe 20 or 30 pictures there, but I'm under the impression that my camera has the ability to take really large images and lots of them. So if I had, let's say, 200 or 300 photographs on this memory card, wouldn't it take like half an hour to format?
No, it actually, I would anticipate it will probably also just be a few seconds. Like I have the Nikon
wow.
D750, and I have a 64 gigabyte card in it right now, which is kind of spoiling me. So I can get a lot of photos on that card, even shooting in a big file. And it's literally seems to be just, I don't know, a handful of seconds. Would you agree,
Wow.
Jolene? It's amazingly quick.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good question. They're all good questions here. All right, so, all right, we're off to a great start. Way to go, everyone, for that format. Now you know more than a lot of other photographers already. Okay, all right, so the next thing. So Robert, I think you have a viewfinder. So I guess my question is, do all of you have an eyepiece viewfinder that you can look through to take photos? So that would be like this viewfinder, something similar. Okay, Robert does, and you do, Whitney? Okay,
I
MJ,
do.
do you?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so the next step will be that, has anyone heard of what's called a viewfinder diopter? Okay, so we're going to tackle this one next. Close to your viewfinder, on my camera, it's right, sorry, it's like I'm working in a mirror here. Right here, there's a little toggle switch. Okay, it may be right beside your viewfinder along the side, or it may be like a little wheel, right, part wheel right up on top. And it moves. You can rotate it. And what this does is when you then look through your viewfinder, so if you look through your so if you haven't done anything with that little dial and you look through it and find something to focus on, and then just turn it. You don't need to necessarily turn it very much, but you will notice it's kind of like going to the eye doctor and they hold up the pieces of glass in front of you and you know which is clear, or this one or this one. It's kind of like that. And that little viewfinder diopter allows you, with or without glasses, like I wear my glasses all the time, to adjust that viewfinder so that when you look through it, what you're looking at looks nice and crisp and clear. It has nothing to do with whether your photos will end up in focus or not. It is just simply for your aid in looking through that viewfinder so you're not looking at a fuzzy scene. Okay, so you can just let everyone take just a minute or two, or the time you need, to look through that viewfinder, and then just turn that little dial. And sometimes just to get that sweet spot for your eyesight only takes maybe one little click of that dial. Or if you just want to see what it's doing, just turn it back and forth. Yeah, you have a comment there, Jolene?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in, because if anybody has as terrible vision as I do, if most cameras diopters can only do like maximum 3 stops either direction, like negative or positive 3, but my vision is -5, so it will not correct for me without my glasses. So if you want to use your viewfinder without your glasses, you may or may not have the capability to do that.
Thanks, Jolene.
I just have a quick comment too. I forgot that this course was tonight, so my battery is now dead on my camera. So I'm just gonna be listening and taking notes, so I won't be participating.
Okay, that is unfortunate, MJ.
Sorry about that.
It happens. Unfortunately, it happens. And if you want, like, I don't know how quickly you can get some charge to your battery if you would like to plug it in. And
Yeah,
see if
it's
you can...
I just plugged it in, so I mean I will
Okay.
join in if it charges it fast enough. So
Sure. Okay, and even, MJ, depending on where we're going here, like if we're pointing out different buttons and dials, we can still have you see if you can find those on the outside of your camera.
Oh, for sure.
And-
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thanks for letting us know, MJ. Sorry about that battery. All right, I think though too, MJ, even with your battery in that situation, you will be able to adjust your viewfinder diopter if you haven't already.
Oh, okay.
Okay, because it won't need batteries for that.
It will need
Robert-
to be in focus for you to adjust it to your eyesight. So you
Yeah,
would
I'm,
have to,
I'm turning it right now and like it's still just like foggy.
yeah, you'd have to
Oh, okay.
focus the lens on something and then,
Oh, right, of course. Then you'll need the power for that. Right,
Okay.
okay. Sorry about that, MJ. I led you
No.
astray.
All good.
Okay. All right. Whitney, how did that experiment go for you?
It's working. I guess can you, because like I'm focusing, like I've got my charger at the end of my bed, looking at the wall on the other side of my room. I can definitely see it working. But what scenario would I use that for?
Really? Oh, that's a really insightful question. And really just once, right? Because now that you've set it for your eyesight, you can pretty well just leave it alone because it doesn't
Oh, okay.
have, yeah, it doesn't have a purpose in your actual photo shoot other than just allowing you to see clearly what you're doing.
Okay.
That's kind of its only purpose.
Okay.
Okay, that was a good leading question there. All right, and Robert, that worked for you?
I saw the button. I got an idea what to do, but I probably don't have to touch it because I don't wear glasses for outside of reading. So it's probably a pretty good
Okay.
setting. I will probably take a look at it tomorrow during daylight and maybe focus on a tree 1,000 feet away or something like that to see if it makes a difference, but I really don't want to play with it.
Sure.
On that
Okay.
note, does it move something in the camera? Is that what it do? It doesn't move anything, eh?
all it's doing is adjusting basically the mirror that's projecting into the view. Like it's not actually adjusting the focus mirror or the focus screen. It's not adjusting the lens. It's not changing anything on the sensor. It's only changing what you're seeing or the reflection of what the lens is seeing, basically.
Okay, so it's actually playing with something inside the viewfinder itself.
Yeah, inside the pentaprism, yeah. It is, but it's not really moving anything so much. Well, I mean, I guess it would be changing the distance, but
Okay, thank you.
minuscule.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, and then also, Robert, you could, if you wanted to decide you wanted to experiment, focus on that tree 1,000 feet away, and then focus on, it could be a book, right, or a sign down the road, or something, and just see if it does not look really nice and crystal clear, then you may decide you want to give that a tweak, or you're happy with where it is. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. All right. Now, let me see. Okay, maybe Robert mentioned this as well. We're going to jump into the file size. So the reason I like to discuss and have you discover the file shooting size in your camera is for a couple of reasons. One is, first of all, so that you know. And one of the things, or several things, that file size can affect is the space available on your memory card. So if you have your camera set to a small file size, then you're going to be able to get a lot more photos, or definitely more photos, on your memory card as compared to if you have it set to a large file size. And it's kind of personal preference, what you would like to pretty well kind of default to perhaps most of the time for your file size. But something to be aware of is, let's say you're traveling and you've got the, that beautiful stellar photo and you'd like to make an enlargement. If you're shooting with too small a file size, then you may not be able to get the enlargement that you want. You may be stuck, for example, at maybe a 8x10 in extreme cases, or a 16x20. But if you want that nice poster size or wall size, or even depending on the use of your photos, like I was on a podcast last year and the host was saying, don't send me any of those small file things. I want a what you call a high resolution file. She wanted a nice big file with lots of photo data information in it. And I think it's kind of a trade-off, I guess, if you will, that yes, you won't be able to get as many photos on your memory card, but if you shoot at a higher file, a bigger file size, then you have more opportunities for what you want to do with those photos, right? You can always make it smaller, but you can't stretch it bigger if you don't have enough picture file data. So it's kind of like having, say, two buckets. If you have a big bucket and you have a little bucket, and you have all this picture file data, and you've got a little bucket full of picture file data, a small file, and you have a big bucket full of data, then you've got more to work with if you have a big bucket full of picture file data. Okay, so it just kind of gives you almost a bit of reassurance, I guess, if you will, that you have a picture file with enough information for enlargements if you want it. Okay. And I got stuck with this years ago before I understood that, where I did want an enlargement, and I went to the camera store and they're like, sorry, we can't do this. You want an enlargement, and you don't have enough picture file information for us to be able to make it as big as what you want. So for a long time, there's two file formats, or common formats. One is JPEG, which I'm thinking is probably or possibly what your cameras are just set to. That would be a default. And then there's also a RAW format. And RAW is kind of like the days of film and negative, where negative would be kind of like, the negatives would be kind of like a RAW file. But the bottom line is the RAW file is really quite extremely big. And it does require usually some post editing, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with JPEG, especially in the beginning. And you can still choose to go with a nice large file size in JPEG. Okay, so let's go in and see if you can find those file sizes so that we can see and you can learn what your camera is set to for file size, so that you can change it if you want to, or leave it as it is if you'd like to, but you know what it is, and you can then make a decision. So if you go into that menu again, and then go up to your shooting menu, that will be like the little camera icon. Then if this doesn't work for anyone, just shout out to us or pop it in chat. If you then are in your shooting menu with the little camera icon, hit your right arrow to get over to kind of that page or that screen, and then just start scrolling down. If you don't see it, keep going. If you do, so I have image quality. I also have image size. But if I right arrow image quality, that gives me a bunch of choices, including if I want to go with a RAW file. And then it tells me if I have JPEG fine, JPEG normal, and JPEG basic. Okay, so once everyone has found that, I'll have you just do an experiment in there as well, so that you can see what's going on. Yeah, it's a little fuzzy there, Robert, but I think yes, it looks like you have found it.
Yeah, there's a NEF, RAW, JPEG. Yeah.
Okay, and which one was highlighted there, Robert?
JPEG fine.
Fine, okay. Then, Robert, if you look up, do you have a little window like this at the top of your camera, or like where am I here? at the top of your camera that shows you how many images you have left on your card?
That would be on my screen itself.
Okay, so if you can see how many images you have room for on your card. Okay, yeah, I see your question there, MJ. We'll make sure to get to that. Oh, thanks, Jolene. So then, Robert, if you are on JPEG Fine and you see how many photos you have room for on your card, and then if you scroll down to JPEG Basic and hit OK, you'll see that number change. It should go higher.
Yeah, you've lost me. You can talk to other folks here. I'm stuck here.
Okay, go back here. Okay, so you right where you had, I think you said that you had JPEG Fine highlighted, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Right? So if you use your little down arrow with that OK in the middle, that little round toggle button,
Yep.
hit the down arrow.
Now in normal.
Yeah, and now hit it again. Go down
Basic.
again to basic. Now hit OK. And now if you can still see how many photos you have left on your card, it will have increased.
Yeah, I don't know where to get that.
Oh, okay. So do you have this little, do you have any, oh, cripes, where am I here? Do you have anything that looks like this on the top of your camera body?
You won't have
It's
the top display, no.
the top display?
I probably have to change my modes.
No, all of the,
Nope.
because you've got a D5300, which does not have the top LCD
Oh, it
screen.
doesn't? Okay. Okay, that's okay, Robert. Just go back to where you were. Just go back up to your JPEG Fine. Yeah, JPEG Fine. Just hit OK.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, and then just once you've hit OK, just tap the shutter button again to get you right out of the menu.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so
And
actually,
that sort of screen that you saw.
okay.
That's pretty much what you had on your screen.
Okay, so I am just wondering if there, and I guess too for you, Whitney, if you are able to see, so Whitney, do you have a little LCD on the top of your camera or not? No?
No.
Okay, when you are taking photos, so I guess my question for both you and Robert, when you're taking your, and also for MJ, for you just to note, when you are taking photos, have you noticed or do you have a way or have found the way of keeping track of how many photos you still have room for on your memory card? Will it display, for example, you might have room for 235, or 24 or
Mine says 2.0K.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm thinking you must have a pretty big memory card.
I wouldn't know. It's been
Oh,
years.
okay. Okay, so then Robert, if you go back into that menu for your file size and change your file size setting from
I'll go to basic.
fine down to basic.
Yeah.
Okay, then say okay. Hit your shutter button again and then go back and have a look and say if it says something different than that 2.2.
7.8K.
All right, so now, so that's the difference, right? You have now gone to a smaller file and
Yeah.
so now you can get like a bazillion pictures there. Okay, so that's how you can just experience and see how changing the file size allows you to get more photos on a memory card. And the big question is whether you want to or not. So my suggestion is that you would go back, if you want to stay in JPEG, you would go back to that setting fine and set that one as your main JPEG setting, because you're going to have a bigger file. And then that's just kind of like a backup or reassurance for being able to have a bigger photo file if you want enlargements or for use of photos.
Without holding the class up, would I be better off for the long run going to NEF RAW plus JPEG fine? Would that give me more versatility later on?
It would, it does take, so correct me if, or add to here, Jolene, once you get into RAW, like, the one thing I found with that is it kind of got me so many photos because it was like doubling up on the situation. So what I will use though is, well, do you have one card slot or two? Or do you know where you put your
No.
memory card? That's okay.
He's got one card slot.
One card slot. So you will get kind of two photos of every image. You'll have a RAW
Okay.
file, which does require some post-processing, and a JPEG.
Okay.
So what I might suggest, say just for this class or the next couple of classes, is just stay in that JPEG fine if you like. And then as you kind of get through more of the classes and we talk about more picture file stuff or the editing a little bit, if that'll shed a bit more light for you to see
Yeah.
if you want to stay in JPEG for now or add that RAW.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Whitney, did you make out all right?
I think I'm in the right area. It says image quality, but I
Okay.
don't, and I have raw settings, so I think I'm in the right spot, but I have a bunch of symbols. Let me see. Where this? I don't know if you can make
Oh,
those
there we go.
out.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it'll have like an L for large, M for medium,
Yeah.
and then giving you, it'll show you, so Canon will show you in symbols instead of fine or basic, or, well, sometimes it depends on the camera you're shooting with, but yours, you'll want like the smooth incline instead of like the,
Stairs.
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I say you'll want that if you want the finer quality JPEG.
Okay. And the L, M, and S. Do you know? Can you tell me what those correspond to?
Large, medium, and small. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
the file size of the JPEG. So, I mean,
Okay.
like Angie was saying, it depends what you want to do with the picture. I usually just end up shooting in JPEG, because what I do with my pictures is either print out small or 8x10, which I can do with a regular JPEG, or post them on social media. So
Okay.
they don't need to be very big for that.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Okay. Good detective work there, everyone. All right. So we've got, okay, so we have those two.
I
All right,
turn
so
my mic
before
on all the time. Sorry, because my cat's screaming in the other room. So I'm sorry if y'all hear him.
That's okay, Jolene. All right. And so then before we get into a hands-on exercise for you this evening, we just have a couple of other pointers here for you. Okay, so we've covered the file size, your diopter, your formatting your memory card. So I figured kind of consider those kind of some three main points to have a look at so that you know that where they are and what they can do for you. All right, and so now a question is, depending on if you have and this might seem, I don't know, kind of a silly question, but do you have a lens cleaning cloth and do you use it? Yeah, you can also get, and so for a lens cleaning cloth for your lens, right? Oh, there's Jolene's got hers. Just something that's nice and non-abrasive for cleaning the glass on your lens, whether it sometimes gets maybe some rain on it perhaps, or just, now if it has some dust on it, one of the things that I like to use rather than a cloth is I have a little blower, and it just poofs some air out and just helps get some of that dust off. You can also have just a cleaner with has a really nice little soft brush on the end, just to help get some dust bits off. But kind of the caution is, not to use your fingers, because you've got you get the oil from your fingers on the lens, can kind of wreck it. And that kind of brings up the debate for when you purchased your camera in some camera stores, and not sure actually for McBain, I know in Grand Prairie for Watson's Photo Source, when they sold camera equipment, some of the staff there were believers in also purchasing just a UV filter or protective filter that you screw into the end of your lens and just helps protect the end of your lens. There are kind of pros and cons I've heard photographers talk about. Some will say, well, yes, it's great, protects the end of your lens, wouldn't be anywhere without it. And others will say, well, yes, but why would I spend good money on a lens and then cover it up with maybe a less expensive filter? So I tend to have filters on mine, but sometimes depending on what it is I'm photographing, I will take it off. But my camera's, fair bit of the time it's in kind of some dust and dirt. I like outdoors and nature and following butterflies and that kind of thing, or it might be windy. And I figure that for me, it's maybe a little better to have some extra protection. And I was in Watson's one day when this customer had her camera on the counter. She was at the print kiosk and she knocked her camera off the counter. Yeah, see that, Jolene? Yeah, that's kind of what she did too. Excuse me. And it hit the floor and that extra little filter absolutely shattered, but her lens was fine. And I actually dropped my camera once too. I managed to bounce it off my foot for the most part, but it did bend the corner but it bent just that filter, but the glass and the lens was still all right. And
the number of times that people bring in cameras or lenses with a shattered filter and the lens is fine, like it's my specialty at McBain. They'll bring me all of the trouble filters because you can't get them off after they've been misshapen onto the front end of the lens. So yes, always get a filter, even if it's just like, it doesn't even have to be a UV filter, just a protective filter, just something that will shatter instead of the front element.
Yeah. Well, and I was at an event just on the weekend photographing my grandchildren in 4-H, and I have no idea what I did with my lens cap. It drives me nuts. And I looked everywhere for it, but I was able to borrow it from another lens that I don't use as much, but I do have a filter on it. So at least I kind of thought, okay, well, I've got some peace of mind because I have a filter on the end. I'm happier with a lens cap on there, but at least I had the extra filter on there to bring it home and have it in my camera bag. And just quickly, actually, speaking of camera bags, I have a tip for you. If you are out photographing in this colder weather, maybe not -40, but you'd like to be out in your camera, well, maybe then, or even just once temperatures get freezing, before you bring your camera back into the house, if you have a plastic bag with you, like I'll use a big Ziploc bag, and if your camera and lens will fit in the Ziploc bag, when I'm still outside, I'll put my camera in the Ziploc, put the lens cap back on, put it in the Ziploc bag, squish out as much air as I can, seal the bag, and then ideally I would just have my camera bag just inside the front door. So I would pop it, grab my bag, put the camera in the bag, zip it up, and then bring it into the house and keep it away from any heat registers, right? So in a cooler spot of the house or, corner of your room somewhere, and just let it warm up slowly. You will not, which I won't guarantee, but you will, in most cases, I would be pretty safe in saying you will greatly reduce or eliminate the risk of any condensation forming. If you are outside and you just come in with your camera, like I was outside just very briefly with my camera today, and I knew that if I just came inside and just set it on the stairs or something where it is close to a heat register, then chances would be very good that it would probably almost immediately get condensation everywhere. So there's just a little tip for you for some winter photography. All right. And now before we just get into the couple more photo things, okay, we're still good for time here, is my next question for you is to consider how you hold your camera. Now that might seem a silly question, but and it's kind of personal preference. I mean, there is professional photographer that I know, and he's been to Grand Prairie for workshops, and he holds his camera in all kinds of different positions, and he'll have it kind of out in front of him, and he'll just have his hand on the lens like this, and he's doing all kinds of things. Whereas, it's not a have to, but my suggestion or something to consider is if you have you just hold it with your right hand and have your left hand underneath, just supporting the camera. Okay, it then gives you kind of an A-frame where you have your elbows close to your side, okay, and the camera up just in front of you. And it kind of gives your camera some extra stability if you're not on a tripod. Now, in the beginning, I found it was a little awkward to turn the zoom ring on my lens because I was just kind of used to winging it this way. But after a little bit of time, then I found that it becomes much more comfortable, and now it's just like second nature. And there'll be times where maybe it's not easy necessarily to hold it that way, or you just don't want to, or you feel like being a rebel and who said, whatever. But it is something that can help you get some nice, stable, clear photos where then you're not going to have fuzzy pictures caused by camera shake. Right? Sometimes when we look at photos and we think, oh, well, it's a problem with my focus, where it's actually not the focus. It's appearing to be out of focus because there has been what's called camera shake, which is really just a little bit of movement with the inability for you to hold your camera steady. And especially if it's a slower shutter speed, meaning it's taking the camera longer to take the photo versus, say, if you have a fast shutter speed. Okay, so just something to just think of. And, if you're, I know, Robert, you brought up night photography, and, again, yes, you can pop that ISO up. Like I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time in November for some Northern Lights photography. And I wanted to keep my ISO down. So ISO is one of the exposure settings, which we'll get into. I wanted to keep it lower rather than higher, but the trade-off for that is it then meant I kind of played around depending on how the lights were going in the sky, but I was everywhere from, I think my fastest shutter speed was 8 seconds and my longest was 30 seconds. So there is no way that, maybe you can, Robert, but I know for myself, there is no way that I can hold my camera steady for that length of time and not have some blur due to camera shake. All right. Okay. All right. So we're going to lead into an introduction to lighting or exposure. I kind of say lighting, I kind of use lighting and exposure interchangeably because I found for some reason for me in the beginning, it took me a while. Like I just couldn't figure out what the heck's exposure even, what is this thing? So really it's, exposure is kind of, in the simple terms, it's how light or how dark are your photos? Do they look, nice when you're looking at them? You don't have overexposed and blown out areas or underexposed and dark shadowy areas. And it took me a while to even remember the difference between underexposed and overexposed, and things like that. So we'll reiterate those and just talk about those through the 4 weeks as well. The lighting being then the exposure and how lighting affects your photos. So to begin with, oh, sorry, MJ, you had a question there. Why would you want a 30-second shutter speed? Well, I'm not sure if I would say that's a really thoughtful question. If I would necessarily want a 30-second shutter speed, because it could be considered almost too long for Northern Lights, because it also depends on how long do you want to be capturing the movement of those Northern Lights. And 30 seconds could be considered to be a bit too long. And I found that sometimes I would be waiting for that 30 seconds and I'd see something else happening in the sky. And then it's like, oh, come on, because I want to set it. I want to go to this photo. But when it was dark out and depending on the lighting, because my other camera settings, so that this ISO that we're going to get into, because I needed to get the exposure that I wanted, it required the shutter speed to be that long. Now, and so that being said, I had my ISO at, what was I at? I think I was maxed out. I didn't go higher than 2000. Now, if I had, for example, gone to an ISO of, say, 6400, then that would have kind of fooled the camera, if you will, into thinking that it's brighter out than it is. And I would not have had to have gone with such a slow shutter speed. So when we get into next week's lesson, then either next week or for sure by the week after, I'll have you experimenting with those shutter speeds and you'll experiment with ISO so that you'll grasp how these things work together. Okay? But great leading question there, MJ. Yes, thanks, Jolene. Where Jolene's saying for things like night sky photography, you need to keep the shutter open for longer periods to let in more light. And that is definitely one way to do that. Okay, and now let me see, here we are. Sorry, just checking my notes here. Okay, so it's talking about then the introduction to lighting, overexposure and underexposure, and what you're, so now we're getting into what is your camera doing for you. So when your camera is in the automatic mode, it is figuring out kind of to the best of its ability, the interpreting the scene or the subject that you're pointing the camera at, doing some different things for the settings automatically, and then you just press the shutter button and takes the photo for you. And you may find that hopefully most of the time you'll be satisfied with the results you get, or sometimes you may find that you're not and the photo's too bright or a little too dark. But the key now to begin with is we'll look at the three things to begin with here that your camera is doing in the auto mode for you. Actually, there are four. Three are exposure, one is kind of color tone. So there's what's called the exposure triangle. And that's made up of what's called the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. Okay, and then when we get to the exercise here in a few minutes, I'm going to have you just take a little bit of time here and go and take a few photos. I'll just set it up for you with some different lighting situations. And then when you come back, we're going to go over your camera settings so that you can see and begin to discover what's going on behind the scenes for you. Okay, so when your camera is looking at a scene and determining what it thinks is a good exposure or the lighting for you, the aperture that it's controlling is referred to in the aperture. Well, there's the aperture, and it's also referred to in f-stops. So the aperture, the role of the aperture is inside your lens, you have a lens diaphragm that has these overlapping blades. And simply put, you can adjust your camera, or in auto, the camera's doing it for you. It is going to open up the lens, or it's going to close it down to reduce the light. So aperture is about the amount of light that's coming in through the lens. Okay, the lens is open or the lens is closed. You have a little bit of light coming in or you have a lot of light coming in. Okay, so aperture is about the amount of light. Shutter speed is about how long you're letting the amount of light come in through the lens. So like MJ's question where she asked, why would I want a 30-second shutter speed? Okay, so I was letting the light in through the lens for 30 seconds, meaning that's how long my camera was taking to record that photo of the Northern Lights. So light is coming in through the lens at 30 seconds. Now, if I'm taking a photo of, say, horse racing, because I'm down at the local track for the couple months in the summer, then I am wanting to go the opposite end of that. I don't want a 30-second shutter speed because I want to capture the action. And I might be at perhaps say if the light's really good, I might be up at 1/2000th of a second. Usually if I can get around 1/1600th of a second, then I'm okay with that. So that's the opposite end. That camera's going to take that photo really quickly. Okay, so when you're in the auto mode, if you were pointing at northern lights, the camera would be making adjustments to have that light coming in for longer periods of time and how much. And if you were taking photos of, say, your pets or your children, the camera is going to figure out for you how much light to bring in through that aperture in the lens for how long, right? Fast or a little slower. If you get blurry photos, for example, say of taking your pets or your children, then I would suggest that your camera is not giving you or is not working with a fast enough shutter speed. And when you get to the manual mode, you're going to be able to control that yourself. Okay, and so we have aperture, which controls the amount of light, and we have shutter speed, which controls for how long. And then the third leg of this exposure triangle is the ISO. And ISO stands for International Standardization Organization, which is kind of like, who cares? And it also, so what ISO affects is light reacting to and hitting your camera sensor. But a simple definition of that would be thinking of ISO as like a flashlight for your camera. So if you're in a low light situation, in particularly, or a situation where you want to have a faster shutter speed, then if you think of ISO as a flashlight for your camera, it's kind of like telling your camera, hey, it's brighter out than it really is, so you can give me a faster shutter speed. Okay, that's kind of how ISO works in simple terms. Okay, so if we're going to take over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll take these 3 components and we'll focus a lesson on aperture. And depending on, so the next lesson will be on aperture, and I will have you do some exercises with that so you can experience how it works. Now, aperture also can give you some creative effects. So if you have seen photos where, if you think of a postcard, for example, and usually everything is in clear, crisp detail all the way through from the front to the back of your photo. Okay, that would be use of aperture, closing down the lens or opening it up. So in that situation, it would be closing it down. If you see a photo where the background is blurry intentionally, and there's a subject, say a flower or a bird or a pet in the front that's in focus, but the background is blurry, that is a use of aperture going the opposite way to what you would set for your clear postcard picture. And I'll show you some examples of those tonight, and we'll work through those in the lessons. Okay, and shutter speed then, as I mentioned, can control things such as if you need, not only if you need more light coming in low light situations, it can help you if you, or it can give you the ability to have creative. So if you think of those dreamy looking mountain streams or waterfalls where the water's all blurry and feathery looking, okay, that's making use of a slow shutter speed for a creative effect. If you were to see all the splashes and the drops and all the details, that would be using a faster shutter speed. Okay, and then the ISO, if you are on an ISO, and so it's in numbers as well, the lower the ISO number, the less light you're bringing in that's hitting the sensor or affecting the light on the sensor. So if it's really, really bright out, then I generally, if I can, I like to shoot at around a 200 ISO. But if it's really cloudy and overcast out and say I'm at horse racing and I need to be able to capture that speed, then I will increase my ISO, which will then help me increase my shutter speed to get that action. Now, if you're photoing something that isn't moving, say if you're outside in your flower garden or you're traveling and you're photoing a stationary subject, and especially if you have a tripod, then you would still have the option, if it's a cloudy, overcast day, of keeping your ISO lower, because the higher the ISO as well, that's when you can introduce digital noise, which is kind of like a grainy, pixelated look to your photo, and it can be unflattering. So keeping the ISO down will help you avoid that. So if you're on a tripod, then, and your subject is stationary, then it doesn't become as important for how long it takes the camera to take the photo. So let's say that might mean that you could have your camera on a tripod at 1 second, or say 1/60th of a second, which is still fairly slow to handhold, but you can keep your ISO down versus, say, cranking up your ISO, let's say to 2500, so that you can get a shutter speed of, say, 1/1000th of a second, but perhaps you risk a little bit of digital noise. So don't worry if some of this sounds confusing, and if it's overwhelming, we'll work more on this or play with this as we go through the lessons so that you can discover for yourself how all of this works together, what digital noise looks like. I have a couple of dandy photos. I can show you what my digital noise looks like. And you'll, as you go through these and hands-on, I think over time, you'll just, the light bulbs will come on for you and you'll begin to tie everything together. Okay, so before I have you just take a couple of minutes and I'll just explain the photo shoot for you. Do you have any questions about what we've discussed so far? And if it's being confused about, the aperture and the shutter speed and ISO and things, then if you just don't overthink it for now, if you have some pressing questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. Otherwise, we can almost just put those on the back burner for now, because you won't need to know exactly what they're doing for this photo shoot, but you will get to find out what they're doing as a result of your photo shoot. Okay, so any questions before I send you off? Yes, Robert. You are on mute there, Robert. There we go.
One of the problems that I have is that if I tried to follow along with your exercise, my camera instinctively activates the flash if there's low light conditions. Is there a way that I can manually turn on and off the flash so that I can play with this better?
Give me one second.
I was going to say there.
I have to assume that there is somewhere.
Yeah, because I know sometimes I've heard, well, you can just gently push the flash down, but I also know that in some cases it'll just pop back up again.
Which is what it did, yeah.
Robert, so there on the mode dial on the top of the camera where you select auto, manual, aperture, there should be a little symbol with a I don't want to say lightning bolt, or a lightning bolt arrow with a circle and a line through it.
Got it. Yep.
That is auto without the flash.
Oh, okay. It should be green. Okay, got it.
Thank you, Jolene.
There we go.
All right. Whitney, are you okay, or do you have any questions?
I'm good, I think.
You're good. Okay, MJ. Oh, wait, sorry. Well, MJ, you're still charging, right? Unless you have a little bit of battery power.
Yeah, I'm here following along. I haven't checked the battery though.
Okay. All right. So MJ, if you're not able to do this now, this is also something that once you have battery power, if you like, you can certainly do on your own after the class or, you know, over the next several days.
For sure. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. So then Robert and Whitney, here's the exercise for you. And what we're going to do after the exercise and you come back is we're going to take a look at the camera settings for that exposure triangle and see what happens. So if you start off in the auto mode, and then if you just find a couple of things to take photos of that are in a really nice brightly lit area, and then head to a different space and find a darker area. I mean, I think in our last class, we even had someone take a photo in their closet because I think I mentioned that. You don't have to go to your closet.
This is pitch black and it's Inuit art carving.
Ooh.
Gosh, I don't know how it did it. Amazing.
Yeah, that looks pretty nice. Yeah, all right.
I couldn't even
so,
visually
yeah.
see it. It's sort of pointing it into the blackness of my room here.
Okay. And then, yeah, so if you and Whitney can find it, that, like you say, you had kind of the darker area in your room, and then a lighter area could be, you know, up on the wall, the ceiling, if, you know, whatever's close by for you or convenient, where you've got some light, just so you have a difference in seeing what happens when you're in a light area and a well-lit area and a not so well-lit area. Okay, I'll just give you a couple minutes here to get something.
Pardon me, folks. I'm just gonna scooch to the bathroom. I shall return.
All right, remember where you left us. All right, and just while we're waiting for Whitney and Jolene, you're able to get a couple there, Robert?
Yes.
Okay.
What I'm a little bit surprised at is I'm looking at the picture and it says the date and the time and the name of the camera. But it doesn't, and it says it's taken with fine resolution, but it doesn't say anything about what the ISO is on the back of the image.
Okay, so if you, I think this is how this will work for your camera. On that little round toggle dial you have with OK in the middle,
Yeah,
when you have your picture up on the screen in playback and
Yeah.
you hit the up arrow, I think it will change the screen on the back to give you more information. And if you keep hitting it, it will continue to give you more information until you see. So what we're looking for is the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO.
Negative.
Okay, that Whitney, that went okay for you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So same thing for you then, Whitney. What we're after now is when you hit your playback so that you can see your photo. And then when you look on the back of your camera, what kind of information is it giving, or do you see much for information? So what we're after is we're looking for, it might just say a number, or it might give you the letter F in front of it. And then a shutter speed, which might show you a fraction or just a number, and the ISO.
So if I go into kind of the background information of the picture. The bright one, I have an ISO of 800. I don't have anything with an F in front of it.
Okay, what else do you see for numbers?
I have 7.43 MB, 98 out of 98, 1 out of 60.
Oh, 1
I have
over
4,
60?
1 over 60.
Okay, that's your shutter
4,
speed.
okay,
Okay,
okay.
and then do you see something like maybe a 4 or a 5.6 or?
Yeah, 4.0.
Okay, perfect. So what you have there, Whitney, then is you have discovered that for that particular photo, your aperture was at f4. So that is letting in lots of light, a
Okay.
bigger opening in the lens. Your shutter speed was at 1/60th of a second, and your ISO was at 800. Okay, so those are your exposure triangle numbers. Okay, and you said that was for your brighter picture?
Yeah.
Okay, so now can you go to your darker one, and then we'll see if you can find that information again.
Okay. Okay, now the darker one is all the same. It did have the flash on when I had it on auto, but it's all the
Oh,
same
okay. Okay, that is
details.
probably why then was the flash.
Okay, I can
Okay.
retry that.
Do you have, Jolene was explaining to Robert on his camera, on the top of your mode dial, do you
The
have,
no flash?
yes.
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
will.
if you just close your flash down and then go to that no flash, and then if you wouldn't mind just taking one more photo of that or somewhere in a darker area, and then we'll get those numbers for you.
Okay.
And then Robert, we'll get your numbers for you too.
I haven't been able to find those numbers for the images. What I did see that's really interesting is that I pressed the little wee triangle button and it shows 3 circles. In the left circle, it is the shutter speed, center circle, it is the f-stop, and the third on the right is the ISO. And as I move my camera around, those things are automatically changing, increasing and decreasing depending upon what I'm looking at. Really
Okay. Okay, so that is your camera reacting in the auto mode for you.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, right on. Okay, Whitney, when you have once you're settled there, find out what happened for you this time.
Okay, so this time I have still 4.0, but 1/10 of a second, and my ISO is 3200.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so what that is telling us, several things, is one, as we discussed, how your camera's reacting in the auto mode. And it's also telling us that because of that the ISO change, that your ISO is also in the automatic mode, because there is the option, and we'll get into this as well, where you could set the ISO to a specific number, or you can set it to a maximum number and it won't change. And say if you wanted to limit that to 3200 or 800, then you could stop it right there. Okay, so we'll get into that. But so does that make a little bit of sense for you, that you can see, if we explain that the ISO is like a flashlight for your camera, it's the reaction of the light hitting your sensor. So the higher the number, the more sensitive it is. But simply put, it's like shining that flashlight for your camera, the higher the number. Okay, which even though your shutter speed slowed down to 1/10, if your ISO had stayed at 800, it would have been even slower, right? You may have been into perhaps, I'm not sure, maybe half a second or even a second compared to 1/10. Okay, so that's kind of how that ISO was working for you. And anytime you're in the automatic camera mode, that's what your camera is now doing for you, right? It's choosing that aperture for you, the amount of light, the shutter speed, coming in for how long, and what it's going to set for an ISO. Okay, so does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Nicely done there, Whitney. All right, so Robert, you discovered that when you move that camera around, you can see how it changes. But let's see if between Jolene and I, we can help you figure out where you can find or how you can find those that information that tells you those numbers.
I can read the manual in my off time.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can figure that out. I don't want to consume class time.
okay.
Well,
All good.
I mean, that is why we're here, is to help you figure out your camera. So if you do want to take some time and figure it out, you should be able to just find the EXIF data, like go through the menu, the playback menu, playback display options, and then select overview, and that should give you all of the information and the image.
Okay, so Jolene, if I'm right then, right, when Robert goes to menu, instead of earlier we looked at the camera icon and the wrench icon, at the very top, there'll be that same little arrow that's the playback icon.
Yes,
Right?
my
So you can go
apologies.
there.
Yeah, the playback menu is the little arrow in the box, and then playback display options.
You would then right arrow to get over to that screen or that page, right? And have a look here. Yeah, so once you're in that, did you get to playback menu, Robert?
Yeah, I found the little arrow and playback display options.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you, I'm trying to figure something out right now, because as far as I can tell, if you change that to like overview, that should tell you all of the EXIF data, like, sorry, all of the settings for the camera while you took the photo, but it is also going to make the image display smaller. So I'm trying to
Right, but unless, so though Jolene, right, so I just went into mine, so I have a bunch, like I have the focus point, I've got highlight shooting data, all that kind of stuff. But when I'm in playback, depending on how many times I hit my little up, once the image is displayed, depending on how many times I hit my up or down arrow, I can cycle through those. And so it will show me, right, a photo with nothing. And then if I keep going, it will keep adding information so that I can see the histogram, I can see the camera
Right.
settings, right? So it doesn't always fill the screen.
Right. So then, Robert, if you, I guess then get out of the menu, like just half compress the shutter so that you back out of the menu entirely. And if you just hit the playback button, which is the little arrow inside the box, and like Angie was saying, hit either the up or the down button, you should be able to cycle through until it gives you the information with the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture that we're looking
Yeah,
for.
unless it's not checked off, right? Because when I look in mine, I've got little check boxes against mine when I'm still in the menu. So if
No,
it
it's
doesn't
not
work,
doing anything. I still don't know what I'm looking at here, even though I did go through the steps.
So did you, okay.
Playback, display options, overview.
Well,
check.
check all of,
Yeah.
check all of them.
so when you go into your display options, then Robert, let's say you want to have your shooting data highlighted, then you would highlight shooting data and hit OK, and a little check mark should come up in that box.
When I hit OK, it changes screens again. And I don't get a little check mark in the little box.
Oh,
So I slide across. Oh, there you go. I toggle to the right and the little arrow shows up.
sweet.
So I should do this for all 4 boxes in the vertical.
Yep, if you would like to, yes.
Shooting data overview. Okay, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay,
And now I exit.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then go back into bringing your image up. And then hit the up or down arrow with that little OK in the middle, and I think you will start to see some information.
No, same thing.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay, I'll play with it, read the manual and figure out what I'm doing.
Okay, if you have trouble with that still, Robert, just feel free to reach out to Jolene or myself, and we'll help you with that before next class, if you like, if you have time.
And then when I jump back, the little check mark box is gone. It didn't stay highlighted.
Ah,
Okay, I'll figure that. I'll read the manual and figure it out.
okay. Let us know if you have issues with that.
I just feel like I'm taking over the class. I don't want to do that.
Well, and you know, it's the one thing, and I appreciate that, Robert, but also, you know, the one thing too is it's you know, you can often find someone else will have similar questions or similar issues, and you know, it's I get what you're saying, but we're all good. All right, Jolene, how about a screen share? I'll see if I can figure this out now.
Why
And
why are you putting it on me, Angie? You're the one who has to share.
and I will see if I can figure this out, and I will show some photo examples here and talk about some composition and some lighting. All right, I just have to hit my share screen, right? And there we go. All right. We'll just check. All right, are you seeing a fairly full screen of a mule deer?
Seeing a file folder with the deer in it, but not the full screen of it.
Oh, Jolene.
What did I do?
It's not your fault, it's all mine. All right, so can you see a bunch of thumbnails?
Yes,
Okay, so if I double click on it,
it should fill the screen with it, ideally, I would expect.
and it's not?
No, it is not.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
hang on, I'll stop the share for a second.
Yeah, do you have two screens going?
I didn't think so. What's here? Hang on, I'm just gonna minimize you for a second. I'll just bring up the first one here, maybe, and see if that makes a difference.
I think we learned when you open it first and then share the screen, it actually works. I don't know why.
Oh, shoot, there. Okay, now I've got to get back to you. Here we go. Okay, now share screen. See if I.
There we go.
Now, yes, okay, okay, there we go. Okay, you're seeing pretty full images? Pretty, okay.
Now you're cycling through them, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
right now we just see the deer.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, so starting off with the deer here, this one is an example of camera shake. And how I know it's one way to tell that it's camera shake versus just an out of focus photo is that pretty well everything here is blurry. Okay, and especially you can see it in, hopefully you can see it in the eyes and the nose and the ears. Okay, and the background, this is also making use of that aperture for creative effect with blurring the background. But the point of this photo really is that I have some camera shake going on here. And even if the focus was on her face or her eyes, I've got some camera movement. Okay, I gotta move this so I can.
It just looks like fur.
Yes.
Yeah,
Kind of blurry fur.
I wouldn't even call it that.
Okay. Okay. So this one, so the next two photos, will be a feature that you have in your camera that also you will get to experiment with. And it's called white balance. And if you have ever had photos turn out like this, or similar to this, or you have a weird color and you're wondering why, then that could very well be the white balance setting in your camera. Now, I'm suspecting that it's probably I'm pretty sure your cameras will be in the auto white balance setting, which we'll discover in another class. And in most situations, the camera does a really good job. But for things like Christmas trees or school gymnasiums or certain lighting, and everything has kind of a temperature. The light has a temperature. And depending on the type of light, sometimes this will throw the camera off, like in this situation, okay, where this is not working for me. And here is a much more accurate depiction of what the color is. Okay, so we have the camera in auto white balance, and this is adjusting my camera's white balance to render the image how it looks to my eyes because of the difference in light color interpretation from the camera. Okay, but you'll get to experiment that for yourselves, and it'll make more sense when we get into white balance. But that's what's happening, is the camera is just not reacting to the different type of light temperature, and it'll bring you some weird colors. All right, this one is, I was attempting just to kind of play around and do something different. Nothing really striking about it, but my point here is for landscape photos, I have a crooked horizon line. And sometimes this can be easier to accomplish than you may think. Okay, and so that would be I mean, yes, it can be straightened in Lightroom or photo editing, but this would be a blooper out in the field for myself with that crooked horizon line. And what I've actually photoed it through here, because I was also just experimenting with some different sort of a creative effect, is through a square in a fence that was just covered in all this frost. All right, so there's this photo and the next one that just shows you the difference in composing for a scene where we're just looking at some clouds here. And actually, I don't know if you can see this. I think I have a photo that shows it better. If not, I will find it. Right here and right here, there's a little gray blob, two gray blobs, and they are dust spots. There's one here too. But I do have some dandies if you can't see these very well, and I will show you some. But just looking at the difference here, we have just clouds here, and here I've included some foreground and some scenery to go with it, right? So just thinking of a composition point of view, you know, the clouds by themselves may not be that appealing, but if you can add a little bit of foreground and some scenery, then it's just more of an overview of actually what's going on. A little more appealing for the viewer. There we go. All right, this is an example of a really flat gray sky up here, and helping, you know, where you don't have to include a lot of the gray sky, right? So yes, I've got some taller trees here that limited this a little bit for me, but the idea being in some of those situations when you don't want a lot of this gray sky is then you just eliminate it as much as you can and just pull into your scene whatever it is that works for you or playing with your composition, and you can just minimize the gray. All right, so landscape photos is really easy when starting out, or even just, you know, was something I never really paid much attention to in the beginning. My horizon lines would always be right through the middle. And as time kind of went by, there's the suggestion, it's called a rule, but I use it kind of as a suggestion, the rule of thirds. So rule of thirds is kind of like a tic-tac-toe or X's and O's. If you imagine, you know, a line here, and then your one here, right? And then your two across here as if you're playing X's and O's. And then you would think about, say, with this scene could be improved if I thought, okay, what's the strong point? Do I want to emphasize the field or do I want to emphasize the clouds? And whatever it is I want to emphasize, I would make that closer to 2/3 of the image instead of right through the middle. Now, it doesn't mean that there will be times where perhaps you will want it through the middle to really show off. Maybe it's a reflection of something, or you just like it that way. But a general rule of thirds guideline would be that you stay away from having it right through the middle. And like I say, it's just a guideline and a suggestion. And now this one, in example, now this piece of this hill here kind of blocks the view a bit. But if we just look at the composition, then the foreground here and the color was the emphasis of the image. And you can see that there's only approximately 1/3 of the sky in the image because that wasn't as strong a point as the colors and the scenery. And so that's why the majority of the image fills the lower portion here, and we just have enough sky to kind of balance it out. All right, this is not a strong example, but it's a bit of an example of a leading line, where a leading line is something that just takes the viewer through the scene and gets them looking at your image for longer. So whether it could be a trail, could be railroad tracks, a path somewhere. So how this works a little bit is we have this old chicken coop here, and then this part here with this pathway would be considered the leading line. Now, ideally, it would be stronger if the trees didn't come over the path quite as much at the back. And instead of running into these trees back here, there was something really interesting back there, okay, that would just take the viewer, and maybe not as much foliage back here. So there was a little clearer view that just took the viewer all the way. It's like, yeah, let's have a look at this cool building, and then let's go and look all the way back here and see what's here if there was something more interesting. But so that's a bit of an example of a leading line, but not a super strong one. This one is sort of a crooked leading line, if you will, you know, kind of flat up here, but the one way that it can work is it kind of draws the eye over here. So as well as being able to look over here, I mean, and this was not a stellar photo, it was more just a documentary for, this is what the weather was like at the end of near the end of December. Then, you know, you can kind of have a look in here, but you can also pop over here and have a look and see what's going on. So it's kind of a funky type leading line, but it does give the viewer more to look at with this space here, as compared to if there was nothing there and there was only this, and then you just kind of run into the end of the hill and there's nowhere to go. And ideally, if there'd been a beautiful sunrise or something coming over that from the east here and some beautiful golden light on the grass, would have certainly made a difference. Okay, so this one I just put in here as an idea of just something different with a composition. Hey, I was just lying on my back at the bottom of on the ground here, looking up at the bottom of this tree, just attempting to get as much of it in as I could for height that my lens would allow. And just an idea for a different composition and having yourself in a different position. Now the spider web, these grasses here, or these stems, are a little distracting. Ideally, if they weren't in the image, it would be nicer. And I think if the background could have been blurred even more, then these little clover patches here are also a little bit distracting. But I popped this one in here because it's an example of when I was out early one morning taking photos. And I had no idea that these spider webs were even there until I happened to turn around and look into the rising sun. There's just some sunrise coming up. And I was photoing with my back to the sun because that's kind of what I found some subjects and was focusing on. So kind of pop this one in here just as a suggestion that by turning around or looking around, changing your angle, looking for where the light's coming from, you know, I would not have seen like, and there were spider webs all over the place. And I would not have seen them had I not turned around to have a look from a different perspective.
Can I ask you a
And
question about the spider webs?
sure. Yep, you bet, Robert.
Can you go back? So
Yep.
I would tend to think that if I tried to take that picture with my camera, I would see all the foliage in the back. I'd see everything. So what you tried to do is just take a picture of the netting itself. So you must have gone into manual mode and just played with your f-stops. Is that correct?
Yeah, right on, Robert. That's exactly. Yeah, and
But-
depending on the lens a person has, like if and I can check for next week. I honestly don't remember which lens I had on for this one, but like a macro lens or even a lens with a decent amount of zoom can also help you blur the background and bring your subject to you. But you are right on with your suggestion of having a wide open aperture, or that would be a small number aperture.
Small number, not a large. So you want,
Yes, and this is where this was so confusing for me in the beginning until I heard it explained to me in this way. Because to me, it made sense thinking high number would equal high amount of blur. So the way it was explained to me was the smaller the number, the smaller the amount of intentional focus in your photo. And the higher the number, the greater the amount of detail in your photo. So it's actually depth of field is what we talk about with this.
yeah.
So this would be considered a more shallow depth of field compared to a photo that, say, a postcard photo where everything is in detail would be considered a greater depth of field. Okay, so the smaller the number, the smaller the amount of detail. You can blur the background. Sometimes your equipment will limit that a bit depending on the lens of your equipment, but then the next lesson, we will do our best to have you experience some blurring of the background with your equipment.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so these two mule deer just popped in here. So this would be a greater depth of field, right? Or a higher number aperture, less light coming in through the lens, and just looking off this way. If they were looking to the right, the image would feel, the photo would feel that they were a little more jammed up because there's not quite as much room to the right of this image as there is to the left. It's still fairly tight on this corner, but there's a little bit more room coming through the photo here. So they're not jammed up against the side if they were looking here in the opposite direction. All right, and this is just in the beginning, you know, and starting out with some photography and bird photography. You know, and looking at this, it might kind of be, well, you know, what's the big deal? But, you know, as one progresses and comes along, something even seemingly this simple can feel like a big deal. And in the beginning, I was just content to just get a bird on a branch or anywhere. And then after a while, I was like, well, come on, you know, I can do better than that. Now let's start to get some kind of behaviors. So whether it's the bird singing, whether they're flying, just foraging, some kind of natural behavior. And, you know, you'll just get, so you'll want to, I think, probably challenge yourself, and you'll be encouraged as you go just to attempt new things. Right, this one is just a couple more here. This one not very flattering. Would have been very nice if the chickadee had turned around the other way, but I threw this one in here just because sometimes any picture might be better than no photo, if you know, if that works for you. And this is some, there wasn't a huge sunrise that morning, but a little bit of light coming in here. So if the chickadee had been facing me, it would have been nice, you know, to see some light in his eye. But I've just pointed this out because there's some light coming in here. And it's an example of sometimes, you know, and this really would not be a keeper photo for me, but if there's something that I would say is okay about it, I like this extra light and I like the simplicity of the photo. But really, if I was saying, is it a keeper, it would not necessarily be so. All right, and this one, an example of if you don't have the bright sun. I used to often think, wow, bright sunny day, what a great day to take photos, which it can be, but also bright overcast, bright cloud can also be a super great time to take photos. And if you notice looking at this one, you really don't, I mean, yes, there's some, well, you can see, right? There's some flat gray sky here, but you don't see any harsh shadows and harsh bright spots. The lighting and the exposure is pretty even overall, and so that you see some details and you don't have extremes of sun or cloud or shade just doing kind of strange things to this. You can see the details with that. It's almost like the clouds act as a diffuser, you know, if the between the sun and your subject, and can be used to your advantage. And this would be one example of something like that. This one, you know, would be nice to have more light, but again, this is just an example of just a bit of sun coming in, some side light, setting sun coming from this side, and just catching her a little bit down this side. And yes, it would be nice to have more light, but you can see where you can get a little bit of highlight, at least on the ears. There's some soft golden light, like sunrise and sunset. And when you can get that golden soft light, it can really be magical. And I think there's just one more. And this one, again, setting sun off to this side. So it's creating some shadows here for some light coming from the side. And then this was just a dandy storm that was going on with the setting sun. And the cloud was my focus. So again, I've not put the horizon line right through the middle. I wanted to emphasize the sky, but also capture some of the landscape with this golden light and a few of the shadows for some contrast. And the sky was the main focus. If the field had been the main focus, then I would have, we had that field up in here somewhere, just as a comparison. All right, I believe that is it. I thought I had a good example of a dust spot, but I will pop that in for next time. All right, so super quickly, because I know we're at 9 o'clock, is for this coming week. So I will have Jolene send out an email for you just with a brief recap of tonight. And if you would like to experiment through the week, then even for now, if you would like to take photos or even just observe what your camera is doing as you have your finger on the shutter button and pointing it in different areas of your home, kind of like what Robert has done, and just watch those numbers change. Okay, and especially if you have your flash off, you'll see them change and vary from if you're in a lighter area, a darker area. If you point it outside, you know, look out your window if it's a bright day tomorrow or between now and next week, and just see in different situations what your camera is doing in the auto mode. Okay, if you run into any questions or things you're stuck with between now and next week, please know that you can reach out to myself or Jolene. We'll put contact information in that follow-up letter for you, email. And next week, we'll jump into the aperture priority, and time allows, we'll jump into shutter speed. So in that email will be some information for you just to help set up your photo shoot. Oops. Sorry, hang on, I had something jump in the way there. Set up your photo shoot for next week. And I think unless anyone has any pressing questions, we will let you get out of here on time and not take up more of your evening. All right.
Well, I for one would like to compliment you. I fully expected with a class size of something like 3 people that it would have been canceled due to the numbers, but I appreciate you forging on, and it really creates a much better student instructor ratio. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for that, Robert. We appreciate that. And we are looking forward to this. Thank you, though. Thank you for that, Robert.
Heck yeah, thanks guys for coming out tonight, and we're looking forward to hopefully getting some aha moments as you figure some stuff out on your cameras and start enjoying
Yes.
and playing around.
And then we'll have information too, so you can submit a couple of photos to us if you would like for next week, so that we can see what you're up to and we can discuss photos you love, photos you're having challenges with. It'll all be in that information email for you. All right.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for your time, everyone. Have a really fun week, and we'll look forward to seeing you same time next week.
Thank you.
All right, you are very welcome. All right. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.